Hey, everybody. Welcome to Watch This with Dennis. And we've got another Saturday live stream. And instead of going and talking about any of the new releases, because there were a few over the last week, I thought instead we'd do something a little more theoretical. And that might be putting a little too fine of a spin on it. But basically, the idea of what does it take to build out, or what is the perfect $25,000 watch collection? So, naturally, like all of my ideas, this is stolen. I didn't come up with this by myself. So I was listening to the podcast out of Fratello, and they had a conversation. A couple of them did, at least, regarding a 25,000 pound perfect watch collection that they had worked on. So I went to the site and pulled up their articles, and I saw at least 4 of their writing team played this game of trying to come up with perfect 25,000 pound in their case, euro in their case, 25,000 euro watch collection. So I thought, okay, well, what would I do with 25,000? I'll do US dollars because I'm American and I can't be doing the European conversions. We don't think that way. So, I'll go into that as well. But I thought it might be fun to kind of see what they have and talk a little bit about philosophy. Now, the philosophy of the collection. Now, it's tough for me because I mean, and I don't want to be all like, twirling the fancy pants mustache and being like, well, it's not, I can't really reduce myself to it's like, for me, what's perfect is going to vary day by day. It's one of those things. There are certain watches I like. There are certain watches I don't. That opinion does shift on some watches over time, but do I want to have a lot of watches? Do I want to have one nice watch? Is it like try to make a collection of 3? Do I want a watch box of 6 completely filled out at the price point? And like in any given month, my thought, my strategy, or my approach is going to shift. So this is all very fluid. That's all just a really fancy excuse to say, if I say something in this, and then you're like, that doesn't agree with something you said 3 months ago, Dennis, that's because I'm a hypocrite and I changed my mind. So that's just kind of how it is. In terms of videos, my picks for the 5 best watch releases of 2023, I dropped that just after the live stream. I think it was a few hours later last Saturday. So that's available if you haven't checked it out. You can leave comments regarding which watches you like. Did I name any that you agreed with were a top 5 watch? It was quite an assortment. I should today have the video out of the 5 worst watch releases of 2023. It actually just finished rendering 10 minutes ago. So I need to review it to make sure see if I need to clean up any of my edits. But like I've built the, I don't know how detailed do you want it. I built the video, but I always have to replay it and make sure like all the transitions, what few there are, work. The images are not weirdly overlaid or anything like. Sometimes you get glitches after you do the render, so I always have to review it before I upload it. So my initial export is done. If that's perfect, it'll be up probably early afternoon. If I have to re-edit it again, it'll probably be done today though. So you should see it in a few hours. Is the long and short of it. And I'll catch up on chat before we dive into what the Fratello folks said about their 25,000 euro collections. And today, the Mosier Center Seconds Pioneer is what I'm wearing because I can rarely wear it to work. So I often wear it on the weekend because it's the only chance I get to. It just doesn't slip under a cuff, and I wear cuffs a lot now. So, Polipo, hello, welcome to the live stream. Matthew, glad you could make it, and thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Same for Koji, who has noted that with $25,000, it's really easy for him. He would be a 1 watch person. I don't know why I held up 2 ones because that would make 2, but 1. A Patek 2526. If I was to 1 watch it, we'll speculate on that in a moment, actually. Frank says hi. I say hi back. And Kevin, hope things are going well for you out in Florida. Yeah, if I was just to do a 1 watch, here's the thing. It was the exercise. And the video name is Building the Perfect $25,000 Watch Collection. You cannot have a collection of 1 of something. I hate those videos, by the way. Not that the videos are bad. I hate when people tell you about a 1 watch collection. There is no such thing. It's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. It would be like saying, here, what's the most legible, illegible font? If the font's illegible, you can't read it. So there is no answer. They're all illegible. Be done with it. Quit playing games. Be done with it. So one $25,000 watch. If I were, that's really interesting. I lean like Koji more to dress watches. So for me, I might look at one of the more modern new Patek Calatravas would be one option. But if I'm leaning more on sports watch side, one of those Parmigiani Fleurier Tonda PFs that they came out with, I think at least used around $25,000. You might, I don't know if you can get one with like the Rattrapante in it, but you can get one of the time plus date ones. And I really like the aesthetic of that integrated style. So that might be my more sporty one. Another option I might do actually instead of a Patek on the dress watch side is one of the Breguets. You could probably get a used Complication Classique at around the $25,000 price point. In fact, I think you might be able to get one. They have a really nice world. I don't like the new world timer, but they've got an older world timer in the Classique line, which is very, very attractive. So those would be some things I might do as a one watch, maybe, possibly. Koji says, that's a great one watch choice. I saw some Tondas recently, finally in person. They're gorgeous. I've been looking more and more at Parmigiani, some of their older stuff in particular, because they're like Breguet. They do not hold value well. So you don't want to buy a new, but you buy a used, you might be all right. You might get it. But I really, really liked the Tonda PFs when they came out. Very attractive. My favorite, just like visually integrated sports. I actually also around $25,000 though. I'm not as familiar with the brand because it's kind of newer, and I know some people kind of don't. It gets weird when you like resurrect a name or if you're a newer brand, and Parmigiani is a newer brand too. But Chapek, the Antarctiques, they actually they look decent. I like a lot of what they do on the dial work on them, and I hear they wear very well. Better than the Tonda PFs, especially in the larger sizes, which I probably wouldn't get a larger size anyway, but I would like to try one on at some point. I've always been put off by the price point that they all are at, and I'm not like sure why they're so expensive because there's not the pedigree there in my mind, but the watches review very well. Those are actually like my two favorite integrated sports watch styles. I don't really like the Streamliner out of Moser. I don't like the shape of it. The Overseas is okay, but I'm not enamored with most of the dials. Royal Oak it's not really like they're fine. It looks nice. It's just not really one for me. I don't like the Nautilus. I don't like how the Nautilus looks, which is just as well because they're too expensive. And then you're starting to get lower. I mean, there are all sorts of things. I haven't really looked at Laureatos. I have thoughts on GP that kind of keep me away from it. So there's all sorts of stuff. Good morning, Neff, and welcome to the live stream, and thank you for being a 99-cent club member. Matthew comments. We will get into we'll talk as long as we need to. We will get into the articles. But Matthew says, for one watch, I would want a sport watch with a highly decorated movement, maybe a Glashütte Original. I did have a one of their panel line watches for a few months, and that was really cool. And if you want movement decoration. Now you have to be careful. It's not careful is the wrong word. Just be aware of what line you're getting with Geo. They don't decorate all their movements the same. So like their the 1960s watch or whatever, which I love the dial, is really kind of funky look. Like I don't think they do the hand engraved balance cock on that watch, for example, whereas they do with the panel line and the Senator line. But in terms of, and we talked about it quite a while ago. I think it was on a live stream, but we talked about it. There was a piece done a couple of years ago at this point where they analyzed the average number of watchmaker hours spent actually putting a watch together and what the price of the watch was, and your best bang for buck where the watchmaker hours were high and the price was low is Geo. Best deal in the industry if you want watchmaker time investment in the watch. So, and I think that's still true today because Geo, again, it's a Swatch Group brand, and just like Breguet, if it doesn't say Omega on it, Swatch Group doesn't seem to care, and they just let you suffer. And they don't promote well, and they take a bath on second hand. So there are good opportunities to be had. And Geo's had really nice watches for a very, very long time. They're not just discount Longa; they have their own looks. So the panel line might look a little too much like the Longa one for some people, but they have other choices as well that I feel have their own DNA to them. They still look German, so they're always going to kind of look Lange-esque because Lange has that very German aesthetic because both of these brands are very German. That's how they are. Polipo says, for 25,000 euro, I'd get the IWC IW505003, and that's another non-collection collector. But hey, with $25,000, I completely sympathize. Like if someone were to just say, here, Dennis, here's a check for $25,000, I would buy one watch. I don't want to buy four. But for this, I'm going to give you four. I have four for you, will be what I end up doing. 25,000, Neff says the Chopard 1860 and call it a. That is the one I think that was floating around in my head, and it just didn't click for me. I love the Chopard 1860. So I don't know, it was in my top 5 list. It was my number 1. Spoiler. Now you don't have to see the video. Love that one in the Lucent steel. I don't normally favor steel for dress watches at this point. I think they should be in precious metal, but that watch looks so good. It can stay. It can stay in its steel case. And Neff says, I think it's my favorite watch ever now, Koji. Oh, because Koji said it was an awesome choice. It is an awesome choice, Neff. It's a brilliant watch. And again, especially if you want to explore it, look at go to Chrono 24 or something and just, if you get time at some point, and just start looking at the LUC line under Chopard. So there are a lot of really impressive watches and very inexpensive. Like they've got, as near as I can tell, solid gold case watch, especially if you want a gold watch. They got a lot of them under 10,000 US. So you can look used, and they've got some really clean, like they got like Calatrava-esque, like kind of, it's more of an Explorer dial really, where there's minimal Arabic numerals kind of at the cardinal directions, but otherwise very, very Bauhaus-esque without being full Bauhaus. Again, somewhat Calatrava-esque. They've got watches like that. And again, other than their newest stuff, used, most of those LUC watches are very much less than they were retail. So it's been an area I've been looking at myself. Okay, so let's start again, the 25,000 euros. So this was driven by Fratello. I have the link to all 4 of the collections that we're going to examine, so you can go and read them. I'm not going to read the articles to you because 1, I never do that, and 2, that would be boring, and 3, you should, give them the hits, the clicks that they deserve. So we're going to start with, I'm not sure, Belaz, I think is how his name is pronounced. And he's one that does who was on the pod. There were a couple that were on a podcast and they talked about this. Now, I'm very familiar with, because he does podcasts regularly, I'm very familiar with his collecting aesthetic. He is stereotypical hype beast, would be maybe the mean way to say it. The somewhat nicer way to say it would be he's all about watch icons and is not very creative. That's my take. I mean, no offense to it. We all have our own watch thing. I have my own classic watch stereotypes where you're like, come on, Dennis, really? Everyone loves that watch. And it's like, yeah, that's me in the sub. And that's Bellas in the sub as well. So as you're going to see. So here's what he kind of built. I don't think he listed the price. Maybe in his article he did, but so for his 25,000 euro, he went with a Rolex sub, the no date model, the older reference, a 5-digit, the 14060. So again, I like this watch. It's also exceedingly safe, but okay. So he's going to take a Rolex sub, iconic. What reference number it is, I'm sure he chose this one for the pricing reasons because they all kind of look the same, which is part of why people like them. So, okay. So we got Rolex sub. All right. That's one of his. Then he went ahead. Now this one is his most off the beaten path one. He wanted a GMT watch. So he went with the Grand Seiko SBG N027. I've never really looked at this watch. I don't have it. When we go through what I put together, I don't have a GMT in. And the reason I left it out, even though I personally own one GMT watch, is I do not travel time zones very much. So if we're talking the perfect collection, honestly, for me, the GMT complication isn't particularly useful. So I let it go when I was building out what I wanted to do. That said, this is a very interesting one. I see why he likes it. It's extremely clean. A lot of these elements with this black dial will give you Submariner vibes, or you know what? We'll be quite frank. More honestly, especially with the stainless steel bezel, this gives you Explorer 2, the black version, not the Polar version vibes. That's what this looks like, just with the date window over at the 4 o'clock position instead of at the 3 o'clock position. But that's what it is. This is an Explorer 2 knockoff that is out of Japan. It's got its own DNA in terms of the handset and stuff. It's more refined look. Like it doesn't have that loud orange or, depending on the reference, red GMT hand. Instead, this one blends in a lot better, which I think fits his kind of collecting aesthetic. He likes these sort of classical looks. Again, as you're going to see as we dive down further. So his third watch he went with another iconic stereotype, the tank, the Cartier tank, yellow gold, classic. This is a tank solo. So again, dress watch piece. I can't fault it. It's classically attractive. It's also exceedingly predictable. But again, it's like, what do you do with your 25,000? He's clearly picking icons, and this is very much an icon. If you're going to say iconic dress watch, that screams dress watch, you're going to go with a rectangular watch, and that means you're either going to reverso or you're going to tank. They're both iconic. He went with the tank, probably because you can get them, especially in precious metal. They're easier, I think, to find it at affordable price points, especially the solo. So, okay, he picked that as a watch, and he rounds out his collection with this. What's the most stereotypical / iconic / if you ask Chat GPT or AI to, hey, pick me watches for iconic $25,000 collection, you're basically going to get this list. So here you go. Omega Speedmaster. Never been a watch that's clicked for me in any version. He loves the Ed White. He's gone on about it on the podcast a ton. So he picks the Omega Speedmaster Ed White. I think the Ed White's a very interesting one. So I get that. But that's more, I think, driven by the fact that not the dial, but rather it's powered by the 321 caliber, which a lot of these Omega fanboys are really into that. So, which is cool. That's fine. I'm not into the moon watches at all. They never have clicked for me. So those were his. So the rest of this is all the comments and everything so that's what he built. So Bellas, in my view, is very, very, and I'm sure I have not read his comments, but based off of what I heard on the podcast, I'm quite certain people probably went in and said things like, if you ask a robot what are luxury watches I should own so I fit in, like that's the list you're other than the Grand Seiko. They're all extremely predictable, extremely, again, as I said, iconic or stereotypical. They're kind of both the same thing in this case. So all of the watches he picked, I think, are very attractive. So it's just for me. And when we go through mine, I would want to go more off the beaten path of them. I'm good with going with one, and well, you'll see what I did, but I'm good with going with one icon, but not all of them or only having one non-icon, which is kind of what he did. So let me catch up with chat, and then we will jump over to Henry's list from Fratello. But Frank says, when building a collection, do you like to cover all your bases? You must have a diver, chronograph, GMT, etc. I personally don't subscribe to that philosophy. I am kind of in that boat, but but it's not my primary driver. So I am more, and people are judgmental about it. We all judge each other's collecting styles, whether they resonate with us or not. I am more about brand diversity than I am complication diversity. So, but I try and have limits. So right now ostensibly I own 3 dive watches. Right. I have a Seiko Prospex. I have my Orient Cano, which it goes to 200 meters. So I count it as a dive watch. And I note this because the Cano is somewhat controversial in the Orient line versus the Komatsu because there's no lume on the bezel. And so it's not a real dive watch, but it can do the water. It's just not, anyway, it's a thing. I like the handset better on the Cano. That's why I went with it. And I have an Omega 300M Seamaster. So I have 3 dive watches. I have been willing to go to 4, but I would be uncomfortable at this point going to 5. So it's like, if I'm going to get a Rolex sub, I don't want to get a Blancpain Bathyscap. And if I was to get the Bathyscap, I wouldn't want to get the sub. So you see why I was talking Bathyscap, or in the 50 Fathoms line earlier this year on this channel. I never pulled the trigger on it, not because I didn't save up enough to actually do it, but it's like, well, my biggest thing about not wanting the Rolex sub is because it's such a stereotype, and I don't like being the stereotype. I'm not trying to be contrarian, but I like things to be more unique. That said, I just love the design of the watch so much that I've stayed on the list for one because I'm not in a rush to get it either. It's not, I got 3 other dive watches. If I want to wear one while I'm swimming, I got plenty to do that in. So in that regard, like that's how I'm flexible on that. I'm not right now trying to go out and get a chiming mechanism. I have one GMT watch because I just happened to start with it. That's why I have it. I don't keep track of how many date complications versus non-date that I have. It's more about how I like the watch to look. Brand diversity is where I'm more of an enforcer on it. I've never in one point owned more than 2 of one brand at the same time, and I'm still trying to stick with that. And the reason for it is there are so many watch brands out there that I believe it is best for me to experience with actual, not just going in and trying them on in a shop, but actually spend some time and experience time wearing particular watches to see how they fit, feel, and look for me when they're on me. And then based off of that, I need to decide if I want to move that watch on or not. But what I think a lot of people do, and it's a problem for me, obviously not a problem for them, is they'll get like a Seiko. They like how it looks, they like how it feels, and then they're in the box. They're in the Seiko box, and they won't ever break out of it. Or if you want to do the higher dollar end, we know people just like this with Rolex. They get Rolex. They love the Oyster case. To date, Rolex has been the best watch bracelet experience I have ever worn. Are they the best bracelet in the entire industry? I don't know because I haven't tried them all. But I could see where someone would be like, wow, this fits really well. It looks nice. It feels good. It's iconic. And then all they do is buy Rolexes. That makes you happy. Do what makes you happy. But for me, I'm sitting here going like, well, but what's the big deal with Moser? What's the big deal with Parmigiani? What's the big deal with Breguet? What's the big deal with Chapek? What's the big deal with Chopard? What's the big deal? You see how it goes. What's the big, Crador and Gerard Perregaux and Ulysse Nardon and all the brands I've never worn. So that's why I have that rule for me, just to make sure, because obviously every watch I own is money it's stuck in a watch and not stuck in cash. And so if keeping myself to 2, make sure that I don't get stuck for me. That's where I'm at. So I don't get stuck. So anyway, that's where I'm at. I see Koji gave you his opinion about he doesn't subscribe to the philosophy either. Scott, welcome to the live stream, Scott, and being 997. No, can't talk really well. I need another drink, but thank you for supporting the channel. Some watches are iconic and desirable for a reason. As a collector, it is not required to always be unique or contrarian. Absolutely. And that's where I will sometimes push. Rolex is always the poster child for this because Rolex is like, it brings out the best and the worst of everything in collecting. The watches are really good. They're really robust. They have, they keep excellent time. They are attractive. The saturation a lot of people feel with the designs are because so many other brands have copied a lot of the aesthetic. And I will credit Rolex, especially versus a lot of the conglomerates, where the problem with Rolex pricing is honestly mostly on secondhand. What you can get secondhand out of another brand versus Rolex, most of the times the other brand is by far the better bang for buck. Once you start factoring in Rolex at retail, it's more competitive, especially if you're comparing it against that other watch at retail. But Rolex, while their prices have gone up, they have held the line a lot better. We've all seen what Richemont has done. JLC is my poster child example. Absolutely ridiculous. No improvements to the watches, double-digit percentile increases and 2 increases in a year, the last 2 years at least. Ridiculous. Absolute ripoff. And so there are a lot of good things from a brand, but you've got people who hype beast them. They come across as pretty douchey, I think it's fair to say. And it's deeply unattractive. You got the whole investor class getting into them, which makes it less fun because then it becomes about money and not about the watches, at least for some of us. And then you've got the whole non-watch people who get them. And is it sending a message like, what's next? Am I going to be the person walking around the street with a big old shirt that says Gucci on it and just like total flex culture nonsense stuff? That's where things like that get into the factoring. And I try and tell myself, don't do that, because that in and of itself is being a conformist in a way, is playing into those stereotypes and letting that stop you from getting something that you want. So It's complicated, as all, but hobbies should be. I think hobbies should be complicated. That's the best part of the fun, is thinking through all of that and deciding what it says and what you care and don't care about. And yeah, as you get further along in it, your opinions will probably change. Mine have over time versus what I would and wouldn't do. It's very interesting. So Neff says, okay, serious $25,000 collection out of Neff would be the 36 millimeter palm dial date just 39 millimeter Parmigiani Tonda 1950 in white gold. 1950, incidentally, if you're looking for Calatrava-esque watches that aren't the Patek Calatrava, take a look at the 1950. It fits a lot of that motif, though I think the hands are loomed on the 1950s. Citizen 0200 and the Tudor Black Bay 54. All right, that's very interesting. I know you love the palm dial. You bring that one up a lot, Neff. Actually, you haven't mentioned it in a while, but me and Pepperidge Farm, we remember. We remember what you like. Koji says, 3-watch collection. The Audemars Piguet 2055 89 BA day date moon phase. That, I don't know what it looks like. It doesn't pop in my head immediately. GLC Reverso, probably a duo face, and maybe a Rolex Explorer 1. The Rolex Explorer 1 has never clicked for me aesthetically. But there's an example, back to Frank's question. I bought a Marathon field watch, and then I found I just wasn't wearing it. And while I like the look of a field watch, I don't like the look of a field watch on me. Like, I don't like how I wear it. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, the dial doesn't do anything for me when it's on wrist. And so knowing that was very helpful, because it has saved me from getting an Explorer 1. Because I think that I'd be like, no, if I'm getting something that's that neutral, bland, if you want to use the word bland, I'd rather have a dress watch that does it. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. Neff says, hard to leave out the Tank Solar Beat, but I can't have 2 dress watches. That's an awesome Audemars Piguet there, though. Okay, I'll have to look that one up later. Koji says, brand diversity is a nice philosophy. You get to see their interpretation of similar designs. Those that do have similar designs. And there are some that are more trail. I mean, criticism about their sales model as much as you want. Like, Ming has a case look that I hadn't seen anywhere else. Unfortunately, the one Ming I had, it was uncomfortable to wear, so I won't be getting more Mings. But with the flared lugs and everything, I thought it was a very unique interpretation. Some of that, Moser gets some of that. I think a lot of times people like the dials and what they do with Fume, but I've seen others say it's more to them about the case designs and the shapes that they go with. Because, I mean, the Streamliner is a very different looking integrated sports watch to pretty much anything else out there. They have a very unique side case flank profile when it comes to their Pioneer line. I mean, that's where they mix things up. And their dials in and of themselves are they're pretty, but they're not, I don't know. They're pretty. They're pretty, folks. Neff says, I could do all Rolex, but I really need something that is more movement focused, that's well decorated. With most Rolex, you miss that experience. And I'm wondering if they're going to be changing that, because as we've seen, they are starting to do a few more display case backs. We'll see if they push those further down in the sports watch line, the professional line, which is where people really, I think, want them, because no one's buying the 1908. Speaking of things that people aren't buying, let's go over Henry's 25,000 euro collection. I doubt Henry's going to watch it. I'm just kidding, Henry. Henry's is the most unique that I saw in this lineup. So definitely, he gets points for creativity, contrarianism, however you want to say it. But let's go ahead and dive through. Because of the way he did it, he actually has, I think he's got the most. It's a little weird because someone else kind of built the collection out. People can't play by the same rules. This is so, guys, don't be goofy. Your contrarianism needs a limit. I think someone, we'll get to it. I think someone else built like a collection with one philosophy and then built another collection with building multiple 25,000 euro collections is cheating. It's cheating, folks. It's cheating. So what'd he do? All right, I do not know the brand CWC, so this is why this caught my eye initially. The CWC Royal Navy Spec Auto Diver MK2. This, to me, reminds me a little bit, the bezel reminds me out of some of the stuff I've seen out of Seiko. But, again, okay, so he wanted to go ahead and have a dive watch. Out of a British brand. As you can see, he listed the pricing beside the watches. So this is quite it gets into what I consider expensive tier or luxury tier, because it's crossed the $1,000, in this case, euro threshold. But I mean, as far as dive watches go, it's, I mean, there's a lot more expense out there if you wanted to go that way. So, okay. This one doesn't click for me, but it's interesting. It's kind of like got an Explorer numeral layout, but otherwise it's a fairly busy dial that looks quite well loomed. But so for dive folks, I wonder, no, it doesn't have a loom shot on it. Okay. So there's that. All right. We talked about icons. Here's an icon. This icon doesn't work for me very well. It would have 40 years ago, probably, but but of course, it's very, very much fair to name because it's so affordable and it's very famous. Casio F91. So he has the Casio F91 as his sort of carefree watch. For me, I would, and we'll get into this in fact, but I would rather spring a little bit more money and get a G-Shock, just because I think that they look cooler, quite frankly. And depending on what you want to do, you can still stay pretty affordable with especially if you're not going solar power or auto update like radio or GPS or anything or Bluetooth. You can go higher without getting, like, you wouldn't even have to add 200 to this. So, but anyway, a lot of people love this watch. To me, it's of its era a little too much, a little too 80s. So not my style, but hey, I understand people might like it. Next watch, another kind of more micro brand, Manta. I'm familiar with Manta. I wasn't really familiar with the Manta SkyQuest, but here is an interesting GMT option. Definitely a lot more, I think, colorful than Balassa's choice out of Grand Seiko. Also, I'm sure more affordable than the option out of Grand Seiko. But you've got this, again, we still are running with a black dial, but because you have that red GMT hand, it stands out really well. Plus, this is going to have an adjustable bezel. So this is less Explorer 2 and more GMT Master 2. So for those that want to be able to actually rotate the bezel for using time tracking purposes, this is going to better meet that sort of need. So in that regard, if you really need a GMT function, I would actually say this is probably a better choice for a lot of people, just because it's a little more flexible than the fixed bezel iterations of the GMT. Kind of depends if you want to do like the whole 3 time zone versus 2 time zone thing. I don't know how many people are into that. Again, I don't travel enough I barely use the GMT functionality on the one GMT watch I do have. So not an area I'm really strong on. My biggest criticism at this point out of Henry is, are you noticing something? He's very fond of black. So there's lots of, and hey, black looks great in a watch, but how many do we need in the perfect collection? See, this would be, I don't have a color collection rule on my collection, but I am cognizant of part of the thing about watches is when trying to pick them out, like, I'm not a fashion, but look at me. I'm sitting here in my t-shirt, in my jeans. You can't see my jeans, but I'm in my jeans. I'm not like into clothes. So when it comes to picking stuff, it'd be like, just for variety's sake, I don't want all my watches to be black dial watches. So he's got a black dial watch, then he's got a black watch, and then he's got another black dial watch. Okay, so that was that pick. Hey, look, let's have another black dial watch, folks. He's starting to see the patterns. It's interesting when people give you like 6 watches, for example. I think you start to read a lot into their personality, at least when it comes to watches, just based off of how those all look. Because usually at 6, I think you have enough volume that you start to see repetition in what people favor. And they may know. I mean, I know. Anyone who's watched a number of these live streams knows, oh, there's Dennis. He's going to love this one because it's got a gray dial. Oh, he's going to love this because it's got sunburst. I mean, I'm very predictable too. I have my tropes that I like. So anyway, here's an interesting perpetual calendar, though, the 3750. This is from IWC. So far, I think this is currently the most expensive watch he's got on his list at about 7,500 euro. I actually think this looks pretty good. Again, this wasn't a model I was familiar with. I don't look IWC very often. I had an IWC Portuguese at one point. I didn't own it for all that long. It was very big, which was the style, but didn't really, it was hard to wind. It didn't work for me. I can whine all about that at some point. It was a nice watch, just didn't work for me. But, so anyway, so this one I thought was very interesting, sort of more vintage choice. Interesting bracelet too. I'm trying to think if I've ever owned a bracelet like this. No, I think maybe I've handled them in the store, but I don't think anything I've ever owned has been like it. But anyway, there's that. And then I think he ends with this, the King Seiko. So another vintage, because I think this is an older model. Yeah. the 449990. So yeah, it's definitely an older model. It's under 1,000. So I actually at one point was looking at King Seikos. I really like the vintage King Seiko aesthetic. I like the modern King Seiko aesthetic. I don't like how Seiko's charging this premium and there's nothing special about it other than it says King on it. It's like the same old movements in their other watches that they sell for over $1,000 less. Wine. I'm not here just to whine, but that sort of thing. But anyway, this is an attractive watch, not a black dial. So he gets extra brownie points. He finally went with what I like, gray and silver. So that's good. No, it wasn't his last one. And he has a Type A style Flieger from IWC. Sunburst style, blue, very attractive. I'm a Type B over a Type A Flieger, but these are far more wearable for most people. The dial is a more modern aesthetic. So it's a good pick. Would never have been mine, but it's an attractive watch. And not too bad on pricing. You can get them for what he said, about 3,200 euros. So that's what he ended up doing as watches. He still had a surplus of almost 2,000 euro. So he had, in his article, as you can go and read, had recommended going and doing like a watchmaking course to learn how to kind of work on watches a little bit, which not what I would recommend with the leftover money. I mean, I did that over the pandemic. I didn't do a course though. Just buy a bunch of broken stuff on eBay and then realize just how frustrating it all is. That's maybe my recommendation is actually really bad as I think about it, because I only got a few of them to work. I learned a lot of lessons out of that. Lesson number one was you should start with a working watch, because when it's broken and you're new, figuring out why it's broken is actually a lot harder than you might think it is with as many parts as they have. And if you don't know what the proper part looks like, you might not realize that when something really small has something really, really small broken off of it. So very interesting sort of thing like that. But anyway, we'll next move on to the third article. But I want to catch up on chat first. Pre2, welcome to live stream, Pre2. Right now, I bought a microbrand watch with Explorer indices. I bought a microbrand with Explorer indices at the 12369. Learned the dial layout is not for me. I prefer full Arabics or just indices. I'm in the same boat. It was helpful. My marathon I had the inner track, outer track. I love the look on the dial, but like wearing it wise, it just didn't do anything for me. I was just kind of like, it's not. I sold it to someone else who I'm sure either sold it on or is happier than I was with it. It was a nice looking watch, just didn't work. Doesn't work out. Next says the CWC is very reminiscent of the Mil-Spec Omega Seamaster. Can't remember the reference. I don't know the reference either. Much less I don't even have the watch in my head. Frank says, I have the Manta Noble and Ocean King that I like. Manta is a brand I've heard a lot of positivity about. And that's part of the thing I will give a hat tip of the cap to Henry for actually including Manta in his list. A lot of, Manta, Zelos, Baltic, I've heard a lot of, for different reasons, a lot of positivity around those particular watch brands. DeRosa, welcome again to the live streams. I think it's been a while since I've seen you. Sometimes people don't realize they're basically buying the same watch over and over for their collection. I've wondered how many realize and are just cool with it, and how many maybe don't really think it through. But if it makes them happy, I guess it doesn't really matter if they thought it through or not. So whatever you like. But yeah, it's when you get to the point where it's like the ones that I think it's true, or I suspect it's true, is when you hear, and you'll hear this on some of the watch podcasts and stuff, or read them in the forums, where they'll be like, yeah, I have a collection of 24 watches, but I only wear 3. And I think that really warrants, I'm not saying sell the other ones off, because sometimes if you collect, you might just want to own them. But you might want to ask yourself, like looking at like 30,000 foot view, what do you have? And why are those 3 things always solving your wrist choice question? And then I think for a lot of them, that's when they'll realize, you know what? It's because I got a lot of stuff that does the same thing, and I just wear the best one that does it. So yeah, I agree in a way. But others, I think, know exactly what they're doing and just like to do it that way. Koji says, I literally sought out doing exactly with the core part of my collection. Okay. And Koji said, 2,000 left over, get some cool custom straps. See, that would have been my strategy. I wouldn't necessarily suggested custom, but with 2,000, it definitely would be an option. So, well, that might come up a little bit with me and my leftover money. We'll find out soon. A couple others to pull from as examples. First, though, so here's the third piece. This is RJ. I can't remember. I don't think RJ was the other one on the podcast, but anyway, so he took a different strategy. He's the one that I think got a little cutesy. So like he starts, you see this picture of this AP. It's because he starts with like back when he started collecting what would have been possible with 25,000. It's a pointless question. The member berries there are just going to make people mad. Don't even dive into the stuff like that. It's just frustrating. So we're talking about in today's world. So he named some stuff like starting with an Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch. Okay, icon, got it. Then he's all right. This used to be more creative than it is now. Oyster Quartz, Rolex Oyster Quartz. Now that's interesting. It became an option to get into Rolex somewhat affordably in the used side, so people were turning to it. I do think it's worthy of calling out because of the integrated bracelet approach that the Oyster Quartz line has. So it does have its own look that's distinct from regular Datejust. So I say, okay, it's very vintage, and I worry a little bit about serviceability on some of that, so it wouldn't be my choice, but I actually do like how it looks. He does the Breitling Navitimer B01. I like this choice. I think the Bs are, but so for me, I'm wondering, why are you getting a B01 when you're also already pushing another chrono? If you love chronographs, okay. And maybe that's him. Maybe he's one of those chronograph guys that just loves lots and lots of chronographs. Because here we go again. Here's another chronograph, Type 20. This one out of what, Arain, I guess is how it's said. I don't know how it's said. I wasn't familiar at all with this brand. But, I'm familiar with the Type 20 aesthetic on a chronograph. This follows it. It's probably more approachable than going with some other more famous brand Type 20s. So there you go. So he lists that as an option. So that's kind of, it's about 2,600 euro is what he noted. So that's kind of what he ended up going and doing. Then he goes and he like does the process again. So I was a little confused at this when I read the article. Like, I think he's thinking like I think when he says like the collection today, the first set he just did that we walked through would be if he was a new collector who had never owned watches. And then I think this is what he would do at 25,000 with everything that because he's been collecting for 2 decades. What would he do? And he is like a lot of you earlier in the chat, like Neff and Koji, all of you were saying, I would just buy one watch if I had 25,000. I just get a one watch. And so he explores some of the stuff we talked about. I brought up the Chapek Antarctique. So he specifically said the Passage de Drake, which is a very attractive watch. He brought up the Mosier Endeavor Center Seconds Vanta Black. Not one I would do, but a very famous one that a lot of people would like that money could get you into. The Classique 5157. You can get a lot of Classiques used for under 25,000. So this might be it at its retail. I do like this one quite a bit though. So anyway, but he goes on saying he can't do just one watch. Like he can't live with just one watch. I would have said it's not a collection. Get back on topic, RJ. We're trying to get on topic. So what do we have? Another Omega Speedmaster Professional. He named one earlier. Now he's, I guess, named a different one. I can't keep these references straight. I don't care. It's the Speedmaster. I don't care about it. But that's what he named. I totally get it. Brigade Traditional. I hate the Brigade Tradition line. I don't like the look with this open work. But that's because I don't like open works. I like the Brigade Classiques, the Brigade Traditions. I get it. You get that pocket watch look. I'm always just bothered by how little of the dial is dedicated to time telling. Same issue I had with the Christopher Ward Belcanto. That's what it mostly comes down to. I just don't like that look. I'm okay with the hours and minutes only taking up a portion of a dial if you're being creative, like the Pano line or the Longa one. I'm not okay with it like this. It's fine. I'd never buy it. So there's that. And then he's got leftover money. So then he talks about another Speedmaster Professional or Rolex Explorer 1, I think is a 14,270. So here with this guy, with RJ, clearly is a Speedmaster fanboy, totally stuck in that trap. I can't do a one brand collection. I really can't do a one model line collection. And he seemed to be, he had some variety beyond that, but he seemed to really flirt with that. But again, it's another collecting strategy that some people really like. ever do a search on YouTube at some point if you've not, for SOTC. Remember, you can write State of the Collection. I had mine, a couple months ago. I used to always do those in November, but lots of YouTube people do them. But take a look. There are a lot that are like pure Seiko or almost pure Seiko. That's just, you'll see more of those than the pure Rolex for dollar reasons. It's easier. Like if you want to get into watches and collect, you can have a robust, deep collection of Seiko, obviously, far more affordably than you could with Rolex. So it's just more common, but it's shockingly common how many people seem to have like stayed in Seiko, and when they branch out, they buy a Citizen. And I'm just kind of like, you could branch out and buy an Orient. You could branch out and buy a Manta. I don't know. Anyway, everyone's got their own approach. Catching up on chat, Scott says, I appreciate sentimentality, but I don't subscribe to owning a bunch of merchandise that I don't use. Neff says, put that $2,000 aside for service on all those vintage watches. That's a fair point. And Koji notes, geez, people really love their Speedies. It's a thing. It's like a cult. So I don't normally diss the Speedmaster because I'm just going to take a bunch of downvotes. So it's not that I think it's ugly. It's just, it just doesn't, I have no emotional connection to it. And I like space, but I don't know. It's just doesn't work for me. I can dive in. That could be its own episode. We do like, why doesn't Dennis love the Speedmaster? An analysis. We could do that as a live stream at some point when I'm really hurting for topics. Speaking of topics, let's get through the last Fratello picks to help shape our way, and then I'll do mine. So here's Thor's picks. Great name, by the way, Thor's. His is interesting. So his is off the beaten path would be how I would describe it. So he picked a Grand Seiko dive watch. He went with the SBGX 337. This looks extremely legible and to me extremely ugly. I mean, I think this is a love it or hate it watch. I don't hate this watch. I would just get a Prospex though over this. It just doesn't, but like it looks beefy. I mean, this thing looks like it can go through a lot. But anyway, it was interesting. Definitely interesting. So kudos to that. I didn't know about this one. I don't look at Grand Seiko sports line very much though, so it's not unusual for me not to be familiar, but I was totally unfamiliar with this watch. So interesting pick there. In terms of a watch. Here's one we haven't talked about today. A lot of people love the Chrono. I think that's how it's said, the Chrono line. So the Chrono Tokyo chronograph is what's picked. I actually like a lot about this. I've never seriously considered getting one of these watches. I love the handset and the dial look itself. I've just never really explored trying to go ahead and get one of these, but it's got that Art Deco look to it. And that's kind of what I think appeals to me about the Reverso over the tanks from Cartier is the Art Deco that's embraced with basically the whole Reverso lineup. And so I think that's what's working for me here. But anyway, I liked this pick. It's not a cheap watch though. I mean, this is like around 4,000 euro or so. 30? Yeah, it's about 4,000 euro here. So, but anyway, I like this pick. So I actually agree with this one. Zenith Defy. Now, I have a Zenith. I have thought and looked at Zenith Defy. Again, here's another integrated sports bracelet line that a lot of people I don't think about on first blush, and maybe it should be. I really struggle to find dials in the Defy line that I like. And we've already talked about it. I hate open work. I hate skeleton. I just think it hurts legibility. And I don't even think this one's a very good job of keeping it legible. Blowing this up here. I don't like this. Other than the case and the bracelet, which might be nice, nothing about this dial works for me. So I do not like this pick. But it's pretty unique. So Thor's going pretty unique in terms of his choices. And then he tried to end with one of the historic Vacheron Constantin overseas lines. I note it as he tried because he went and he found he was like trying to pick these and he remembered back when they were like 3,000 to 4,000 euro, and he talks a lot about it. And he says he found one for like 8,300 euro, all that stuff, but it had to be imported. The reason I note all of that is then here at the end of the article, again, go and read the article. You can see all the details. He goes and he failed. He failed. This is a 28,000 euro collection. So he lied. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it, but he left it in there because people just break the rules on these things. Guys, when we play a game, don't break the rules. Come on. He needed to drop the overseas. It pushed him over the edge, or he needed to sacrifice that ugly dive watch. I don't know, but I mean, I guess it is what it is. So like Koji says, love that VC Neo Vintage. He cheated. That shouldn't be in there, Koji. He cheated. This wasn't, what can we do with 30,000 euros? That totally changes the whole dynamic of the game. He cheated. That VC doesn't belong in there. It has been burned in the fires of my rage. This cheat rage that it's induced out of me. DeRosa says, chronographs get a lot of love. Probably not a lot of use. Yeah, when I have one, and when I wear it, I usually try and use the chronograph at least once or twice in the day that I wear it. I'm mostly thinking about just trying to make sure any lubricants are still getting moved around more than actually time. I used to, when I would wear my Citizen quartz chronograph, I used to time a lot of stuff with it. But once I got my Explorer 2, I quit wearing it. I don't know where that watch is anymore, if I even still have it. But anyway, I used to use it to time like project work that I would log for stuff. And I'm not in that job anymore, so it's just, I don't need that anymore. But it was useful while it lasted, so to speak. So, all right. I beat around the bush enough. We've consumed almost an hour already using this as the basis of the discussion. So what are again, I'm not doing euros because I'm American. What's my perfect? Now I've rolled my eyes while I do it because it's not going to be perfect, folks. It's how it is. So what's my $25,000 collection I'm going to present to you today? Okay. So here's how we're going to do it. Number one, I'm starting with this. I'm starting with a full metal G-Shock. This is the GMWB 5000D-1. Now, I was not hung up on having a full metal G-Shock. I own a G-Shock. It's not full metal. It's a square. The squares are my favorite shape. I'm propping up a sheet of paper where I have all my pricing down. Here's the thing. If you've never owned a G-Shock, the biggest problem that I have with the one I own is it's a sync, it's a radio sync to update the time. Those radio sync watches are horrible about syncing. It's like you got to like I have to prop it up facing a certain direction near a window or a door. You sit it. It takes a few minutes to do it, and it's cool because it snaps it to the atomic clock when it finally happens. But I basically have to force it every time we transition to and from daylight savings time because it won't auto update otherwise. That part of it sucks. Now they have a few watches, but not very many, that do that radio sync up through like the GPS satellites. However, what they're mostly doing now, and this watch is one of them, and it's why I'm using it, Bluetooth syncing. So it syncs like to your phone or whatever, and then it pulls the atomic time. That's in today's era, that's going to work a lot better than the radio tower thing. The radio tower thing is way antiquated. So I really wanted to have that sort of update and sync. The problem is most of the watches that Casio has on their G-Shock site that do that are negative display. I've never owned a negative display Casio. They look great in photos. Again, though, lots of people have owned them and report back that they are very hard to read in a lot of lighting situations. So I need a normal contrast dial. So that's why I've chosen this one. It's super attractive. You're going to want to get like a different type straps in case you don't want to just wear it on the metal all the time. But it comes in at $550. So we've stayed real cheap. This is the beater watch. I do think you should have a beater watch. And yeah, you might be like, oh, it's the metal. I don't want to beat it up. No, they throw it on the little rubber strap. It's fine. It's a G-Shock. It's supposed to look like it's gone through life. Be cool with it. Worry about a G-Shock if it costs you like $2,000 about beating it up if you're going to worry. And if this is, there are plenty of other, give up the Bluetooth tech and get one of the standard rubber ones if you spend less than $200. And if it really bothers you, if it's metal, and it's going to get scratched. Okay. So that's my first pick. Second, here's my icon. Here's the stereotype. I love the no date sub. I don't know. I watched Sean Connery wear it too much in James Bond as a kid. I don't know what the deal is. It's classically attractive. It's a nice watch. I've tried them on. Feels great. I'd say go ahead and get the modern iteration. That's the 124, the 124060. But get it at retail. We're building the perfect $25,000 collection doesn't require you to rush out and pay gray market pricing. So get it for the $9,100. Get yourself on a list. Is it going to go up here in less than a month? Maybe. I don't know if Rolex is going to jack prices again or not. Probably won't buy much if they do. But anyway, there you go. Definitely one I would want. So that's now $9,100 off of my total. I'm at about $10,000 at this point out of my $25,000 in the collection. Next, I need a dress watch. You already saw one of the Fratello guys talking about Breguet. Well, I'm going to talk about Breguet as well. A lot of Breguet classiques that I like. For the purposes of this scenario, I'm going pretty old school, true to form dress watch style. And we're talking the 5930 Breguet Classique. This is a 35.5 millimeter watch. I don't care what flavor you get. Yellow gold, rose gold, white gold. I'd probably get yellow gold in this small sizing because it's going to be classically attractive. Super balanced dial. We'll go ahead and pull one of these up. The BAs are the yellow gold. So here you go. You get that hand engine turned guilloche dialing. These are closed caseback watches, solid gold caseback watches. So no, you don't get to admire the movement, but you get to have additional gold. Again, it's a small watch, 35.5 millimeters is going to go in any scenario you want. Completely classically attractive, completely underrated because it's Breguet and no one knows anything about them or cares about them anymore because Swatch doesn't help promote them. The watches are all over the board on pricing. You can find these list gray market unworn at around 10 to 11,000. Used, if you're willing to go used, you can see a variety of price points. I'm going to go ahead because you see out of all of these a range of around what? We've got $6,800 on this screen all the way up to $9,600. So I put 9,000. There are multiple that are under 9,000 here on this screen. So I'm putting $9,000 in for the dress watch to go ahead and almost fill this out. I'm going to add a fourth watch though, and that is a Zenith. Here, we're at Joma Shop Gray Market Dealer site, just under $6,000, $5,995. This is the El Primero Chronomaster Sport chronograph. I have the Chronomaster original. I really like the watch a lot. However, perfect collection. And again, is it perfect for me? Is it perfect for me to like tell people to think about? It's going to get you an awful close look to the Rolex Daytona. So maybe you're not going to, if that makes you uncomfortable, you're not going to want to go this route. It's got its own Zenith DNA. This photo isn't the best photo of the watch, in my opinion, in terms of lighting, but you get the tricolor subdial registers, which is not something Rolex does. So it's got that uniqueness. It's got the date window uniqueness, which is this placement might feel weird to you, but this is true to form from the original El Primero movement. Totally there. Bracelet, watch, chronograph function, and it's a 5 hertz watch. This actually times to 1/10 of a second. And this is the modern take. This is the new El Primero movement. So as you can see on the bezel, it says 1/10 of a second because that central chronograph seconds hand whips around the dial once every 10 seconds to make it very easy to read the 1/10 of a second using the actual bezel insert. So those are my 4 watches. All added together, that's $24,145 US. That leaves you $855 for what? As Koji noted, straps. I'm not going to say custom straps because we don't even got $1,000 to play with, but that $800+ is plenty of money to get you another strap or the hardware to go ahead and put on multiple straps for that G-Shock we talked about. Go to Barton Bands or whatever and buy one of the little hardware kits. It's like less than $30. Do that, and then you can get some straps for the Breguet. If you don't want to always wear it on the Croc Gator, I don't know if it's alligator or crocodile, it's probably alligator. Wear it on some other strap if you want. And likewise, if you want to NATO up your Submariner or your Zenith, you got plenty of money to do that with. So those are the 4 that I would build out as of today. That'd be the 4 that I would build out. So, okay, catching up with chat. What do we got? We don't got a whole lot. We see DeRosa says, my collection has to have a no date sub for sure. The date sub just doesn't work for me. Like aesthetically, it's fine. It's just, I remember the classic, the original. And it's Tim Masso. If you ever watch the Watch Boxes channel, Tim Masso, as he almost always says this if he starts talking about the Submariner, it's like the no date sub isn't actually called the no date sub by Rolex. That is the Rolex Submariner. The one with the date is the Rolex Submariner date. It's a different version that they came out with later. It's not the original. The Rolex Submariner by default means no date. So it's a super clean look. The idea of the dive watch, doesn't need a date. It's the symmetry of it. I mean, Omega does a good job, I think, with the 6 o'clock date on their Seamasters, and I don't mind there necessarily being a date. And I actually like 4:30 date windows like we saw on that Zenith when they're well integrated, like they are on that Zenith, because it's creative. So it's everyone has their own sort of thing on it, but it's an icon to me. To me, when you say Rolex, I think no date Submariner. That is the watch I think of, not the Daytona, not the GMT Master 2. It's the sub for me. It's always been. And I think the Daytona looks good, and I think the GMT Master 2 looks great. But for me, it's the sub. I love the sub. As boring as it is, but I have enough creative watches. I don't need them all to be off the beaten path, or so I think. So Koji says, solid lineup, Dennis. Obviously, I love the Breguet. The Breguet is tough. I have been looking a lot at Breguets lately, and it's like, I like that. They've got the 38 millimeter, like the ultra thin one where there's no date on it. Oh, that one, it's no seconds hand either. It's just hours and minutes. It's super good looking. They got the weird one. It's kind of weird. I don't remember the reference number, where they have the Roman numerals around the edge, but it curls in on itself. So it's asymmetrical, but there's no cropping or anything. It curls almost like a snail shell a little bit. It's weird. I don't know if I would want it. I can't decide if I would want it or not, but it's weird. And it looks kind of cool in the way that it approaches it. I'm not big on, like with Breguet, they have these also with these offset seconds hands, almost like the 4:30 date window. You have like this offset small seconds on enamel dials. I like the enamel, but with Breguet, I so would want the engine turn, that hand engine turn dial. I just could never bring myself to get an enamel. I'd rather go and get an Anarn Dane. What is that? Is that who it is? Who does the Anarn Dane is who does the enamel dials? Like, I'd rather get enamel from a brand that is known for enamel, and let Breguet engine turn their gold dials. I don't want them to do. I'm sure the enamel may very well be harder. I don't know. But harder to do, not harder as a material. But I want it to have that some sort of patterning. That's what I like about Breguet. That's what I think so interesting. So it's just one of those things. Jeffrey, welcome to the live stream. We're almost done, but Dennis, big Pinball Network fan, saw you own the same Omega Seamaster. Great minds. That thank you for tuning in, and I'm glad you enjoy the stuff over on the Pinball Network. Again, as longtime viewers of this channel know, I'm a sucker for gray dials. So that Seamaster in that gray, Omega does my favorite gray of any brand. I love the gray. I'm sure it's the same shade, but I love the gray in the Seamaster 300M like I have. They do the same gray on one of the Aquaterras, which looks excellent. It's an excellent looking watch. And they also do that gray in the DeVille line. So if you're looking for something a little more dressy and less sporty, check out the DeVille line. They've got an excellent gray like that as well for folks that are also lovers of gray. Incidentally, and speaking of the Pinball Network, David Dennis, the co-host of Silverball Chronicles, also, he doesn't, to my knowledge, he doesn't have it. He likes that Seamaster as well with the gray. I think he almost bought one at one point. So maybe there's something, maybe it reminds us of the silver ball of pinball, and that's why we're so drawn to gray and silver dials. I don't know. But it seems to be definitely now be a trend with 3 people who are into pinball being into that gray dial. There's something there. There's something in the water. I'm not quite sure what it is. DeRosa says, the new blue Zenith Chronomaster Sport with a steel bezel is very attractive. It has harmony in design. Yes, there's so much that's worked with this, with the Zenith Chronomasters in general, even the Aaron Rodgers one, which I think the biggest thing, other than whether or not you like green, or if you do or do not like Aaron Rodgers, is the decision to do Arabic numerals like jersey numerals on the dial. Weird choice, yes. But overall, I think this dial as a palette to design on works very, very well. I'm also a really big fan, though, of, again, as I've noted, I own an original, the smaller version that doesn't have this bezel insert. That is a good platform. Like there's a salmon Hodinkee colored dial, looks really sharp in that case shape. And then there are also the old, really ultra 70s ones. They used them in the older movement, where there was like a smoked dial. I've always been drawn to getting that watch. It sells pretty cheap too, compared. Like I think Joma Shop has it for like $5,400 because no one wanted them because it's so 70s. As like it's almost like wearing bell bottoms. It's so 70s. It's one of those things where it's sort of like the Nautilus. It worked, and with Zenith, it's not clicking for people. But for me, the Zenith, it does. The difference was I wanted the Chronomaster original because of this tenth of a second movement. That party trick, as lame as it is, it's only a party trick for me. But watching that central second sweep around once every 10 seconds is just super cool. But it's easier to read on this watch than it is on the original, because the original is a 38 millimeter watch. It's quite small. It wears very well, and it is legible in my view. But if your wrist size is over 7 inches, mine's 6 and 3/4. I'd say if you're over 7 inches, I'd look here first. Or try on an original and see if you're still happy with it. This will be a safer bet for you, though, because it's a slightly bigger watch design. But that is it. I am done with this live stream. I should be back next Saturday as usual. Don't know what the topics will be yet, as usual. And again, later today, I should get that video of the the 5 worst, top. I mean, the top of the bottom, I guess, if we invert the pyramid, the 5 worst watch releases of 2023, because even in watches, we have to be somewhat toxic, I suppose. But I'm not too mean. Well, you'll be the judge of that when you see the video. But some of them will not surprise you. Let's just put it that way. Some of these, I'd say number 1 will shock no one, especially if you've ever watched this channel. You know already what my number 1 worst release was. But anyway, I think it'll be fun for a lot of people just to kind of hear the logic of it. And, in that, go ahead and comment in terms of what watches you thought were misses this year, because most watches look pretty decent, but there are a lot of ways a brand can miss. And we saw a lot of it this year, I think. So anyway, that's it. Until next week, I will talk to you on the next video, and I hope you all have a really good weekend. Take care, everybody.